Over the past year, San Diego has been forced to face its greatest shame: homelessness. Spurred by an uncommon liver infection spreading countywide, action is finally being taken by nonprofits and governmental agencies to get homeless people off the streets and into facilities that seek to remedy some of the ills they face. The point-in-time count of the number of homeless people is currently at 9,116 people. But that number isn't perfect, as it just counts the homeless people on a certain day. They estimate that the number of people who are some way homeless and use services might be greater than 15,000. The reason why there is more visibly homeless people in San Diego is because of the decreases in the number of sheltered homeless. From 2015 to today, there have been an extra 2,000 unsheltered homeless people in the city. I'm Daniel Wheaton, and this is Refocus. To understand the issue, the San Diego Union-Tribune Community Advisory Board held a forum Wednesday night where people connected to homelessness explained what works to get people off the streets. Those presenting were Gordon Walker, CEO of the San Diego Regional Task Force on the Homeless; Amy Gagno, Chief Operating Officer of the Alpha Project; Ruth Bruland, Chief Program Officer of Father Joe's Villages; Sergeant Richard T. Schnell, retired San Diego Police and the founder of the Homeless Outreach Team; and Veronica Hughes, a formerly homeless mother and SDSU student; and Peter Seidler, San Diego Padres managing partner and philanthropist. This episode is quite long, but homelessness is one of the most pressing problems for San Diego. Enjoy the show.
The real question that we have to answer is, what do we want our cities to look like as San Diegans? What do we want our cities to look like and to be? And more importantly, how do we want to care for our brothers and sisters who are not as fortunate as we are, who may have missed some opportunities in life or who just need help? Methods to solve this problem are well defined in other states and cities, are based on best practices, and are data-driven. San Diego has developed community standards which reflect best practices. All service providers receiving federal funds use these best practices to some degree. All use the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, which collects data on each individual whenever that person uses or interacts with the service providers. We have developed systems to collect data and to be informed as to what is actually happening in regards to our homeless population. We are supporting a permanent solution to this problem, which is called Housing First. The federal government adopted this Housing First model after it was used in other locations and shown to be the only model to effectively decrease particularly chronic homelessness. Housing First is a program that houses persons first and provides supportive services to meet their needs so that they can gain stability in their lives in order to find success in society. Other programs require persons to make changes in their lives before they can gain housing. Studies across the country have shown that housing people is cheaper or less expensive to society than leaving them on the street. When you consider the other costs to society, such as health care, emergency room visits, ambulances, jail time, street cleaning, and other costs incurred by society, it is cheaper to house people. A study was done here in San Diego called Project 25, which indicated the same results. Prior to housing the persons involved, costs for the group were $3.5 million for the group for a year. And after they were housed, the costs dropped to $1.5 million in the first year and subsequently to $1.1 million, showing a drop in cost of 67% per year. These types of studies around the country show consistent reduction in costs when using the Housing First model, regardless of the housing market. Housing First is also scalable, which means that it is very effective with large groups of individuals as well as with small populations. There are some good specialty programs, but they are not scalable. And in most cases, they are much more expensive in dealing with each individual. So what does it take to succeed? There are three basic concepts that are necessary to find success in this endeavor. First, there must be political will. Our elected leaders must be aligned with the process and be willing to make decisions that align resources and funding in the proper direction. It is not necessarily helpful to just throw money at the problem without truly identifying what the problem is and then focusing the resources at that problem. This is not meant to be only the elected officials, but also the many wonderful government workers who also have a strong hand in supporting the political will. Secondly, there must be cooperation and collaboration. As a community, we must work to cooperate and to collaborate. All of the service providers must be focused on the established community goals and objectives. All of the business leaders need to focus on what the community standards are and how to achieve them. Government workers need to work to solve problems and to not just preserve their positions and hide behind needless rules. Funders need to align behind best practices to support the programs that work and not necessarily those that have been funded in the past. Ordinary citizens, such as yourselves, who want to help by giving time and money, should support those entities that are following the best practices. The third item is we must be united in efforts, desire, and will. While there are many good ideas floating, not all will be successful. Many of you may have ideas on how this could be done, or at least how it could be done better. The problem of not following best practices is that resources are diverted. Most problems waiting to be tested may or may not be focused on solving the problem, and almost all are trying out ideas that are not shown to be best practices. It took years for this problem to develop here in San Diego, and like most social problems, there are no magic fixes. Social problems are not easy to solve, nor are they fixed overnight. But significant change can be made by following the data, utilizing the plan that has been created, and working together. We are at a tipping point here in San Diego. While the hepatitis A outbreak is heartbreaking, the resulting action and attention allow us to make significant changes to our homeless operations and to begin to move toward permanent solutions. The outbreak has galvanized political will, which will create modifications in our daily operations. We must recognize that short-term modifications in how we house our homeless population do not constitute solutions, but that they are necessary for public health purposes and also to break the mindset that the status quo is sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon.
My name is Robert Hubbs, and I've been homeless on and off for about 10 years. I was living in Phoenix, Arizona. My life was wonderful. My son was born with 4 heart defects. At the age of 4, he had to have an operation, and the operation went good, but the closing doctor didn't do his homework. 15 days after the operation, we had to take him off of life support. Within 3 years, I had there was no meaning to the family situation anymore. We just couldn't keep it together. My wife and I divorced. I started drinking with the people I was working with, and then drugs became involved. Ended up leaving Phoenix. It's been rough ever since I moved out here. It took 20 years of following that lifestyle till I was finally arrested at the age of 55 for possession and use of drugs. I was in treatment for a year rather than going to jail. 2002, I became homeless. I stayed in motel rooms a lot of times, or on people's couches, that sort of thing. 2003, I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure through all of my drug use and things like that. I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous in 2007. I haven't had a drink or a drug in 10 years, Alpha Square is a place you can call home. I do a lot of work with alcoholics and addicts, and that's pretty much what my lifestyle is today. You know, instead of selling and using drugs and destroying somebody's life and my life too, I try to help people to do just the opposite, you know, to improve their life rather than to destroy it.
And now we will hear from Amy Gagno of the Alpha Project. Amy, come on up.
Thanks for having me. I'm super psyched. I had no idea we were going to have a video, and that's our project. So, wonder why we do these things? It's that kind of story right there that makes you kind of keep going every day and every day. One of the things that I want to talk about and be optimistic about is all the momentum that's happening right now in identifying the issues that are going on and actually seeing the political action, the business leaders, the community involvement, which is really what's going to help us solve this problem. We can't do it by ourselves as providers. We can't do it with just the government agencies. We need the help of the community. And over the past year and a half, I know, and Peter's been an amazing driving force in what we're being able to accomplish now as a community, not just as Alpha Project, but as a city, is to get those things done and to address the needs that are happening now. You know, we just barely, you know, the city asked us to open a campsite over on 20th and B. We did it in less than 10 days. It was really challenging, but to see the people that are there, we have over 40 children that, oh, and by the way, I want all the nice nods, whatever he said, the I'm gonna agree nod thing, I'll take those. Don't yell at me or boo at me. I'm not like that. Anyways, so, you know, we have almost 200 people there right now, and I was shocked. You don't see many family homelessness on the streets. When you walk by, you typically see singles and this type thing. And I've been doing this 20 years. I could not believe that we have over 40 children in a campsite. Some of my staff are here that have been amazing in making it operational and running it, and the challenges and the logistics of doing something that huge in 10 days is challenging. But to see the people that are there that are so happy to be there and so blessed that they don't have to be scared at night, the women, the children, we have 9-month-old babies in there. I mean, it's sad, but the bottom line is it's optimistic because something happened. You know, we see an issue, the mayor's been supportive, the housing commission's been supportive, and like I said, for the first time in 20 years, and my boss would say 35 because he's older than me, but to see this involvement from every aspect, it makes it work. You know, it's not just my problem, it's not just your problem, it's not just your problem, it's all of our, it's an issue, and it needs to be addressed. These are people. And what we say to people all the time is, did any one of you wake up one day and go, I want to be homeless? You can raise your hand for that one if you want to, because I know nobody's sitting there going, you know, when you ask a little kid, what are you going to do when you grow up? They don't say, I'm going to be a drug addict. They don't say, I want to be a homeless person. I want to be in a domestic violence situation. That's not a choice. For some people, when they get in their adult ages and things like that, I understand that there's some people out there that are making a choice, right? But it's only a matter of time before they choose to get the help that they need. We always like to stress that because these are people's kids, their grandmas, their mothers, their fathers, their cousins. And I bet you 100% there's somebody in this audience that has had this situation occur in their life. And we're all about empowering people, not enabling people. So fixes to this situation not only have to do with what Gordon was speaking about in terms of housing first. We're a huge housing first provider. Alpha Square, we just built that, 203 units of an amazing housing project. It doesn't need to look like affordable housing. It looks like, we call it the W Hotel. I mean, it's really cool. Come down, see it. It's awesome. We started a pizza place too out the front. And that's to provide work training programs for the people that live in the building and to help subsidize the cost of that housing project. So we're all about housing first. We're all about one size fits all, though, too. People that are addicted to drugs need treatment facilities. And, you know, when Gary was talking about the reductions in transitional housing and things like this and federal government initiatives, there's other things out there that people need. If you're a domestic violence victim, I'm not going to stick you in an apartment where your perpetrator is going to find you. So I really want to stress that. We are huge. We were one of the first providers to do the housing first model. But we're also realistically going, look, there's other particular issues that need to happen too. So you can't just be eliminating shelters and things like that. So we're pretty proactive in terms of saying those type of things. You know, we have rental assistance programs as well, and we've placed over 200 people in a year in their own apartments and providing the support that they need. Not paying their rent for a year, assessing each person's situation and not enabling that and getting them going on their own. So that's sort of how we operate. But I think the one biggest piece that I wanted to say was how appreciative and optimistic I am personally, and I know our agency is, and I think that the providers are and everybody else, that the business community and the community in general has all come together for the first time ever to address a situation that is all of our situations to address. There's a homeless issue here, and it's everybody needs to become involved in how you solve it. And you don't solve it by giving people money and panhandling and just ignoring the problem or just complaining about the problem. Help us solve that problem. And I think this is a prime example right now in this moment over the past month and a half, 2 months, Peter? I don't even know. For us, it's been a year and a half. But in the last 2 months, I've never seen any kind of initiatives, proactiveness as I've seen today. And our campsite, the sprung structures that are going up, these aren't warehousing people, and I'm going to repeat that a million times. We're not warehousing anybody. We're helping them. We're getting them out of there. They're not sitting around and staying there for as long as they want because, oh, I have a place to stay now. The goal is to transition them into permanent housing. They may need a little time. That's okay. We're doing a whole system change right now in San Diego in terms of addressing and using common assessment tools, vulnerabilities. Maybe you don't need the kind of assistance you need. Using our resources effectively by using that common assessment tool and saying, okay, you're scoring over here. Maybe you need a deposit for your first month's rent, and you're good to go. Maybe you need more than that. Maybe you do need a treatment facility. Maybe you need a shelter. Maybe you need this. Maybe you absolutely need permanent supportive housing, but everybody needs to understand that permanent supportive housing takes years and years and years to build. It's a super competitive process. It's really expensive. We have a new project breaking ground in Normal Heights for veterans, which is another 53 units, and it's all permanent supportive housing where all the services are on site to support those individuals that need that level of service. The people that don't need that level of service shouldn't be there because that's not an efficient way of using the monies that are coming into this town. So there's a lot of changes going on in San Diego right now, just different ways of dealing with this homeless issue in general, and I'm really optimistic that it's going to work. It's going to work. I'm feeling like with all this positive energy and effective policy changes and things like that, that you're going to see a reduction in what's going on. And whether you care about it or not, as Gordon was saying, it's costing taxpayers millions and millions and millions of dollars by not addressing the issue. And why not make the people that are in the situation part of the solution as opposed to always seeing them as the problem? And that's what my message is today, is to come help us help them, because we want to help them, and we're not going to enable it. And if you don't want help, then go. We want to help you. So that would be my 2 cents anyways. No speeches for me. I'm not a speech person.
My name is Marlene Ayala. My family and I, we were homeless for about a year. I lost my job. I exhausted all my unemployment benefits and couldn't find a job. My husband now, him as well, couldn't find a job and exhausted his benefits for unemployment, and so we ended up getting evicted. We bounced around from home to home. My kids would sleep in a friend's home, and if there was no room for us, my husband and I, we would make a little camp in their yard and we would sleep outside. And then we went to TJ with my mom. We'd be at the border by 3 in the morning. We would cross with my mom, drop her off at work. We would park the car. Down the street from the school, and we would sleep there until it was time for the kids to go to school. We'd go to the gas station, and I would get them ready for school at the gas station's bathroom. It was a blessing that we got here at Father Joe's very, very quickly. I submitted an application here to Father Joe's medical clinic, and by the grace of God, I got hired. We bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in the South Bay. My oldest son is now 19. He goes to San Diego State. And my youngest son is 11. He's in the 6th grade, and he plays football. And my daughter, she is now part of the youth symphony through the San Diego Symphony. I have this month and next month, and I'm done with my Bachelor's of Science in Healthcare Administration. And if it wasn't for Father Joe's, I don't know where we would be. It's a blessing. It's a real blessing to be where we're at.
And now I would like to welcome Ruth Bruland she's the Chief Program Officer with Father Joe's Villages. So Ruth, come on up.
Good evening. You're going to hear kind of the same thing from a lot of us this evening. I'm going to try and say it a little differently because even though it might sound the same, how it gets acted out every day in the work that we do, Alpha does, other agencies that are here tonight, it could sometimes have to be very different. I really appreciated your numbers, Gary, talking about what's happened in San Diego and the homeless population, and also calling out that while the numbers are very important, we can't forget that it's about people. So you got to remember both of those things. For numbers for us at Father Joe's Villages, every month our teams gather together and we analyze what our outcomes are, what's working, what's not working. The best practices that Gordon mentioned, we utilize those best practices. We have the licensed programs, the certified programs. All those things are so very important and are part of the science of ending homelessness. But what it boils down to is the people. And so that really is where the rubber hits the road with all of the science and the numbers. So I want to talk about that, like I said, in a little different way. We've already seen some lives on the screen. You're going to meet someone in a little bit. But I want to tell you about 4 different lives to try and highlight some of what I think is so very important. And me first. I'm going to talk about me first. My grandpa came from Norway in the late 1800s, and he became a Lutheran pastor in the United States, and he had 2 sons, one of which was my dad, and those 2 sons became pastors. And reading on there, I think somewhere it says on there that I was a Lutheran pastor, and at this point you might be thinking, destiny. It was a little bit, I think. And then, ironically, my grandfather and my grandmother, they started what in essence turned out to be Lutheran Social Services in Portland, Oregon, by, get this, reaching out to the Norwegian speakers who were homeless. Back in the day, it was called the hobos, and that's part of the work that they did within the Lutheran ministry. So now you might be hearing destiny shouting in your head, because that is indeed what I ended up doing on both counts. But along the way, when I was trying to figure out what to do professionally, I had some periods of time where I didn't have a home. If I hadn't put my stuff in storage, it was in the back of my car. My address a couple times was a P.O. box. I never thought of myself as being homeless, but indeed, I was homeless. But I had friends and family that would say, hey, come stay with us. That's okay, you're between things, come on over. I had those kinds of resources, so that's why I could just go through that whole experience and not put together not having a home and homelessness. Destiny? Destiny? Maybe. So I want to talk about another life. There's a woman named Michelle that we have come to know through the village, and she was born to a mother and father who were both alcoholics. Her mom was also mentally ill and really felt more comfortable living on the streets than she did in a house. And so most of the time of Michelle's growing up, her mom was homeless. Her dad, alcoholic, she understands now that he was a veteran, that he probably had pretty bad PTSD, so his behavior was pretty erratic. Michelle married a man, and had quite a few kids, and he became progressively more and more violent within their marriage. And so she decided that she needed to leave. She became homeless. Destiny? Destiny? Within her homelessness, she learned about some of the places that she could go to get help rather, and so she landed at Father Joe's Villages, St. Vincent de Paul Village, and we, of course, had programs that she could access, but it didn't really take that first time. She left us, remained homeless. She came back to us a second time. There was another issue that was very important to Michelle at that point. She liked alcohol a lot. So the second time she came, she got into enough bad issues that were related to her alcoholism that she had to leave us and with her kids. On the day that she told me this yesterday actually, the day that we told her that she had to leave, that was the first day she went without a drink in a really long time. The day before was the last day she's had a drink ever since. She went to another program for a little while and then came back to the village, and all those programs that have science at their foundation, the numbers that we study, she connected with the staff in those programs and she worked it. She worked it hard. She ended up leaving the village, moving into her own place, her 6 kids. They've continued to grow up. I must add, her youngest son, she did consider naming him Joe after Father Joe, because she felt fondly towards the village. She didn't, but she thought about it. Now her oldest 4 kids are in college and getting master's degree. Her younger kids are doing well in school. Just terrific. Third life. I got a flash of 1 minute. I got to pick this up. There's a woman that I'm going to call Anna. I don't know much about her because she just wrote a report to staff. We have a process where clients can give us feedback and engage in some meetings if they want to, and I read all of those reports to staff, and this one came from Anna, and I know 2 things. One, she had a serious mental illness, and second of all, she had to be homeless because our medical clinic where she was visiting, and this is her report to staff is about that, only works with people who are homeless or are maybe still at risk for homelessness. And this is what she wrote. Who may concern, a year ago, I make a complaint regarding neglect about Dr. Kurt Lindemann. I don't remember what exactly I wrote, but I'm sure nothing good. I was psychotic with paranoia. Please accept my apologies and remember that I was so sick. Now I'm fine. Thank the medication of Dr. Kurt Lindemann. Sorry for my behavior. I know Dr. Kurt Lindemann. He is one of the most fabulous psychiatrists you could ever want to meet. Destiny, destiny for the woman that I call Anna. And there's one more life I want to talk about, and that's yours. Each of you who are here tonight, you disrupted your normal schedule for a Wednesday night to be in this place, to hear us all talk, and that means something. I have to think that there could be a little destiny here. And that destiny is so important because remember, it's that people-to-people connection that we're talking about. We need all the science, we need the numbers, we need the best practice, but we need the destiny of you. The destiny of you meeting up. Maybe it's that you write a letter to your congressperson, your city council person saying, we need more affordable housing. Maybe it's that. Or maybe you write a check to St. Vincent's, Father Joe's, or Alpha, or any of the other providers that are here in this community. We would love to take your money and pay a staff member on your behalf to be people to people. It's your destiny that you chose by coming here tonight, and we are very excited about this. It is a privilege to be here tonight. Don't forget destiny, please.
As I walk around downtown San Diego talking to homeless people for our street art series, I notice a common thread in the lives of these folks: childhood abuse and neglect. Donald H., originally from Baton Rouge but now living in and around San Diego, told me his backstory, and it fit the pattern. Donald never really knew his dad, and when his mom died when he was 7, his older sisters couldn't find an orphanage for him. He was placed in a home for troubled boys, and there, abandonment issues fostered an angry personality. He learned how to fight and cuss and grow up fast in the state-run home. Donald spent adulthood in and out of prison. He lost good jobs due to addiction issues and eventually sought help at PATH, a network of agencies in California which provide assistance to homeless people. PATH psychiatrists talked Donald into getting a therapy dog, and he says his new little friend has made all the difference. He also claims his newfound faith in God has helped with his anger issues. He says he now has a reason for living, a friend, and thanks to the money smiling passerbys donate when they see Ali the Rasta pup, a steady source of income. Donald claims that because of his criminal history, he's still being denied permanent housing in the San Diego region. He sometimes uses money from donations and Social Security to stay at cheap motels. It's not an easy life, but Donald claims to be a lot happier now than when he was a young man. And with Ali at his side, he isn't so alone.
Okay, and now we will hear from Rick Schnell, retired San Diego PD and founder of the Homeless Outreach Team program. Come on up, Rick.
Thanks, everybody, for showing up tonight. I do believe in this destiny that Ruth was talking about. I think I have one slide if anybody wants to. Did it come through? Okay. I just need everybody to pay attention to this because I think it's a common theme that we've got going amongst our speakers is that we're dealing with humans and humans inside of these tents and on the street and all of that. And when I was the Homeless Outreach Team sergeant, that was part of my job, was to educate the officers on this, educate the chiefs, educate the sergeants, and just ask them to calm it down a little bit, right? And I used to tell them that this is the stuff that I believe and that I think that if you're going to be working with quality of life issues, you have to take all this into consideration. First of all, it took me a while to get everybody into this mood of homelessness is not a crime. No one's committed a crime out there because they're homeless. And then I would tell them that there's a public expectation out there that we understand that as law enforcement. They also expected us to use jail as a last resort. I don't think anybody has ever said, no, you can't put people in jail. But they want to make sure that we've exhausted some of the alternatives to using jail. Then I had this little deal with Barney Fife. Everybody remember Barney Fife? He had one bullet. I'm not sure if it was for somebody else or for him or whatever the story was. From Andy of Mayberry, for those of you that don't know. It's on every day, all day long. You can. It's a great show. Anyway, they only gave him one bullet. But law enforcement, we're a critical component in chronic homelessness because that's really all we work with is chronically homeless people on the street, right? So we needed more tools than just a ticket book and jail and whatever else would happen out there. So over the years, we've developed more tools. And one of the things I would tell the officers is all your providers out there, all your treatment providers, everybody that you're going to be interacting with, they don't need our help to bring them people. We need them to help us. And the community needs them to help us kind of chill it down a little bit with the people on the street and just make it more human for everybody involved. So over the time, I developed this concept called the Triple C concept. And it dealt with, if you're going to be doing enforcement out there, if things are going to start happening, you always have to keep these three components in mind: compassion, communication, and consistency, right? Compassion, you can also put down as empathy, right? But the E-C-C-C-E, I needed 3 C's. And you know, and I was doing some reading, and there's like one of the Supreme Court justices mentioned, a dose of empathy enhances the law and moves it closer to the greater good. So the compassion and the empathy together, it's very difficult to get going, but it has to be there. And you know, and with the compassion, I also wrote this other stuff down here. Compassion, the way I see it, is the ability to envision the practical consequences of your decisions on the person you're talking to. And a good example of that would be, there was a day when I was driving down the street in a patrol car, and there was a car parked in the street, and it had the dreaded expired registration over a year, right? If you've ever been in a car like that, you don't want to get pulled over, right? Because we're taking your car. And I had another officer come up and say that inside the car was a woman and her 2 kids, right? They were sleeping in the car, similar to what we were just talking about. Well, I mean, you know, by law, I could have taken the car, right? You're expired over a year. But what would be the consequences of my decision? She's going to be on the street, and I'm going to take her car. That's not what we're here to do. So I just wanted to get that kind of out there. Communication is very important. It was brought up earlier about all the agencies communicating with each other. It sounds easy. It's not easy, because everybody has a different view and a different place where they want to go. But communication is extremely important on getting the show moving. A lot of times I would tell officers, when you're dealing with individuals on the street, ask them what they want to do. Don't be telling people what's up. These individuals on the street, they know what's happening. You need to be asking them to do things. If you've got a group of people sleeping on the corner and the city wants them to move, don't just show up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Maybe come out a couple days earlier and say, hey man, things aren't going to be happening here in a week. Can you guys find some other place to go? 9 times out of 10, things are going to happen. They're going to move. But it was a communication between law enforcement in the street and also law enforcement in the city, which is really, it's very difficult. I found it really difficult. And then the consistency is every day do the same thing. Success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out, right? Every day do the same thing. Don't surprise people. Don't just show up and expect changes. Just you have to be consistent. So like one day you can't just drive by what you said yesterday you can't do, right? If somebody you want people to change, they have to know what's happening and it has to be consistent. And now that's pretty much it. And in conclusion, I just wanted to say that we try to use what they call reasonable sensitivity in law enforcement. And I'm going to quote a wise man from the city of San Diego. If you're not an optimist, you won't last long in this business. So I think Amy brought some of that optimism up. Always think when you're dealing with law enforcement, you might ask them, what about that CCC concept? You were out there doing some enforcement. Did you utilize the CCC? Did you utilize the compassion? Did you utilize communication? And were you consistent in your job? And I think if that happens and we're all like that, we'll all live together nicer. Thank you.
Yvette Camacho, and I've been homeless on and off for the last 17 to 18 years. It was hard. It was hard. I kind of ran the streets, you know, and so when I was with people, it was we were using together. As long as we were using together or we had drugs, it didn't matter. I've lost my kids to my addiction. You know, CPS has taken my kids, and this last time in 2013, I got busted and I lost my kids, and I think that was my ultimate bottom. Having my kids taken away and put in a foster home was a big wake up for me. Then I made a promise to myself that that would be it. So I went into a rehab. I graduated from that rehab. Somebody told me about the Door of Hope, and I just came to apply, and I was like, pretty much, I'm not gonna get in, you know? And they called. I went into the apartment and I almost died. I was like, no way, no way. There's all the shelters and the sober livings and the places that they have in San Diego, it doesn't even compare to this place. They want a plan. So I gave it to them, and I've done everything on that plan just the way I had it. They gave me a chance to put my life together. I got my own apartment. I've gotten a job that I really love. I got a car. I was able to, for the first time in years, get my tax refund. You know, there's just so much I've accomplished here. My 17-year-old, I just sent her off to college a few months ago. So she's at Chico State, starting her life. And that was one of the hardest things, but you know, she's doing it, and I'm proud of her. I love this place, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful.
Okay, and now I would like to introduce philanthropist and San Diego Padres managing partner, Peter Seidler. Peter, come on up.
I'm going to walk around. I'm 56 years old, and I have 2 little daughters. I didn't get married in life until I was in my late 40s. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we love this city. We moved here 5 years ago as we put a small group together to buy the baseball team, and this city is so great. It is such a remarkable place. In ways that greater Los Angeles simply is not, which is where I came from. And I could go on about that, but that's for another day. When it comes to homelessness, this city is going to be best in class. I just met Richard, the previous speaker. I loved what he had to say. I've worked with Amy and Ruth and Gordon, and they're awesome. I think you saw that through their presentations. When we talk about momentum and optimism and collaboration as far as what we're doing as a city to bring our homeless problem to the best it can possibly be, which to me is not a solution. I don't talk about a solution because I think it's impossible. There's always going to be homeless people or a homeless person, but as a society, we know what to do. And when Gordon talks housing first, and I talk a little bit more about some of the transitional facilities, where we end up is we agree on 95%, and we're going to step forward within that 95%. And if there's 5% on the margin where maybe it's this way, maybe it's that way, let's just put that aside and do the best things that we can for the 95%. And that's what we're doing. Facility that was just opened at 20th and B, where there's 200 people housed in these individual tents that are off the street. And by the way, I really commend Jeff and the newspaper and Blanca for putting this event on tonight, but also covering the issue so well, what Gary does also. And I think some of the stories that have been in the newspaper the past several days about the children that are not sleeping under an underpass of a freeway, but actually waking up with food and coloring books, a 5-year-old child or an 8-year-old child. So what I can tell you is that those of us that are deep into the weeds of this, and I know a lot of you out there are as well, we're going to stay on it. We're going to keep taking those steps to make things better and to make things as best as they can be. And within 2 years and hopefully shorter, other cities are going to look at San Diego as, wow, we've got to learn from them because that city is best in class. And when you break down the global homeless issue city by city, San Diego is doing everything that it can. So let me step back in the time that I have and talk about what myself and other people in the business community have done. We felt there was a role for business leaders, in addition to politicians and philanthropists and service providers and mental health professionals and social workers. There is a role for the business community to apply whatever skills that we have and to be constructive and to collaborate and help. So with a longtime San Diegan and restaurateur, Dan Shea, we started about 18 months ago hosting Tuesday meetings. And we made the commitment to ourselves and to others that are working on this issue that we were going to do that every Tuesday. We weren't going to miss a meeting, and we were going to do it forever, whatever that means. We have not missed a meeting. Every Tuesday at 1 o'clock at my office, we put an agenda together. We focus on the next step in front of us. We drill into it, and we decide what to do next. And in a lot of cases, it means working with Father Joe's Village or Alpha Project or mental health professionals or philanthropists who say, geez, you know, I've noticed a homeless problem in San Diego getting worse and worse, and I've always wanted to help, but I don't know what to do. And as kind of people that are trained in business, what we've tried to do is take this big homeless problem that people talk about as being so complex and break it into little pieces, each of which are addressable and each of which society and cities know how to address. And when you break it down into all these pieces, all of a sudden, to me, and I think to those of us really that have expertise in it, it is not all that complicated. As Gordon said, and I couldn't agree more, it takes political will and it takes a city agreeing on the steps that we're going to take. That's the hard part, is getting people in a room and doing some listening and letting the best idea rise to the surface and then acting on it. And one of the headlines I learned from one of my mentors in business a while back was, in business, if you're starting from here and you've got an 80% solution or better, meaning 80% is clearly good, 20% is debatable, take that step. You're going to be way better off than hesitating and waiting for perfection. And there's no perfection in business, and there's no perfection on a big fat issue like homelessness. But if we keep taking smart steps, 80% solutions, 92% steps, before we know it, we are going to be best in class, and we're seeing it. These industrial tents that now are being put up on Newton Street and at the Veterans Village site and on Father Joe's properties will be up and running and taking hundreds and hundreds of people off the streets. But that's not the be-all and end-all. Meanwhile, there's terrific momentum on Housing First that's going on, and the Board of Supervisors did a very, very effective thing by hiring Gordon and bringing him and his expertise and history leading what happened in Salt Lake City, which was a big problem, and now it's a much smaller problem. And I think in San Diego, we're well on our way now to making that happen. And I think with those of us on the panel, those of you in the audience, we're going to continue to capture that momentum and move this thing forward. There's one other thing, just as a person with a business background that kind of tries to address problems in a logical way. In addition to the weekly meetings that Dan and I host, we also, along with the president of University of San Diego, host symposiums every month or two. So we've had 6 of them now. They're 4 hours in the middle of the day. We bring in 30 or 40, the numbers swelled a little bit beyond 40, leaders in the relevant components, whether it's the leaders of the medical institutions or of the universities, business people, and what have you, every month or so. And just one quick anecdote as I wrap up. As we left the last meeting, I had somebody from San Diego State grab me, and then somebody from USD and UCSD come to me together and say, who would believe that the universities are all working together collaboratively on an issue with no egos, nobody trying to one-up each other. And I think as a city, we're doing that now. And after one more speaker, the best is yet to come with this panel where we get to respond to all the Q&A. So thank you for inviting me tonight, and look forward to talking with you all as we go on.
My name is Veronica Hughes, and I was homeless for over a year. I was working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet, and the rent had been increased, and I just couldn't afford to pay the rent and care for my son at the same time. I lived in my car for about 2 months. At the time, I only had Devon. He was a year at that time, and then I was pregnant with Terrence. It was hard. I would try to park in Walmart parking lots or public areas, so at least I didn't have to worry about the safety. But then the police would knock on the window, say, you can't park here and sleep. I had called around, called 211, tried calling all kind of resources, trying to find a shelter. But because I wasn't a drug addict or alcoholic or even domestic violence, there wasn't that many shelters available to me. And the only thing they offered was for me to go to downtown where they had shelters, but those were open shelters. I just didn't feel like I would be safe there just by myself, pregnant with my 1-year-old. My oldest son being autistic, it was just really hard. One of the places that did say they might be able to help me was Solutions for Change. If it hadn't been for Solutions for Change, I don't even know where me and my son, I probably would have had him taken away because of just me living in the car with them. I think the biggest misconception is that people who are homeless are just lazy, that they have mental disorders or they're on drugs. There's everyday people who just lose their job, can't afford the rent. Just life happens and they just find themselves not knowing where to go. I don't want to go back to working 2-3 jobs and not seeing my kids anymore. So I ended up just going back to school at Miramar in 2015. That was the commencement speaker for this recent graduation.
When you fall, just pick yourself back up and put one foot in front of the other.
This fall, I started attending San Diego State. I'm really looking forward to doing a double bachelor's in anthropology and also studio arts, and I'm already applying for the internship with the FBI for next summer, and that's where I'm looking towards going to forensic anthropology, doing forensic science. If it wasn't for Solutions for Change, I don't even know where I would be, even if I would have my son or either one of them. You know, I don't know if I would have stayed on the street or where I would have been.
Okay, well, there's nothing I can add to that. Veronica, please come on up and join us.
Well, when most people see the homeless, they automatically assume that they must be in their position due to mental illness, substance abuse, or they just happen to be a veteran that have fallen through the cracks of the government's care. Yet this leaves out about a quarter of our homeless population in San Diego. A quarter of the population that the San Diego Regional Task Force for the Homeless consider chronically homeless. And this is the category I found myself in the fall of 2007, when I couldn't afford to keep up with my rising rental increase costs. In my personal experience, the people that fell into this category of chronically homeless were people who are trying to escape domestic violence, people who had been relocated to San Diego and just displaced due to other issues within the country and also within the state. And it also included people who just suddenly lost their main source of income, and like myself, who just couldn't keep up with the housing market. In April of this year, the Regional Task Force had released a survey that they had conducted on the 9,116 homeless individuals. And from this survey, 8% of those people were veterans. 39% had self-proclaimed that they had mental health issues. 20% had self-proclaimed that they were suffering from substance abuse, and 31% fit into that category of chronically homeless. 31% may not seem like a lot to many, but considering that 9,116 homeless individuals did not account for the unsheltered amounts, that number should be way higher, especially considering that many of these people were also toting their families and children along with them. Which is why tonight I want to address the need for shelters not only in the downtown locations, but in other areas of San Diego to best help people in this situation. The first thing I did when I found myself homeless is I contacted 211, which is a hotline that any citizen in San Diego can contact for any kind of needs for basic resources such as food, trying to figure out how to get medical assistance. They have resources for military and veteran services, but the one that pertained most to me was the list of homeless shelters and their locations within the county. And this list, it wasn't just a list to me, it was a way to provide a roof over my head and also my son's head, and also give me that release of stress that I don't have to worry about my son being taken away from me. But the thing I noticed once I did get into a shelter is that most people don't even know about the resources that 211 has to offer. And some don't even know that 211 even exists, even though it's advertised quite often. After I had started calling some of these shelters, the biggest issue I had was, like I said, I didn't fit into any of those categories where I was domestic violence or drug abuse or any of that. I was just homeless. So because of that, I wasn't able to get into many shelters. And the shelters that were able to take me, they were at full capacity, or I had to get onto a long waiting list, which was not very optional for me at the time. But this also is why it was so important that the homeless camps and the safe parking lots that were opened by Alpha Project, Father Joe's Village, and the Veterans Village of San Diego were a saving grace, not only for people in my situation, but just anybody in San Diego who didn't know where they could go. The issue with some of these shelter locations is that majority of them are located in the downtown area. There's not very many in the North County or the inland, so for people who can, they will go to downtown and they'll stay there, which is why we see a rising number downtown, because they know that's where they can get those resources from. But the amount of people who cannot leave from the cities that they are at are stuck there, living out of their cars, living behind grocery stores, so we aren't really able to address this area if we don't expand where we have these shelters located. The third point I wanted to bring up is that most of the shelters, at least when I was homeless, was just aiming at getting people off of the street, instead of trying to make sure that they can address the issues that cause the homelessness for different people in that situation. And when people first enter shelters, if we were to have resources there to be able to assess what these people's needs are, we can better increase the chances that they won't have many more people walking back in those doors the next day. In conclusion, the solution for homelessness isn't a one-step process. It needs multiple steps with the goal of success for all that are involved at the end. If we can increase the number of shelters throughout our county, then in each city, we will see a lower amount of homeless people that are just collecting in one area. And if we can address the reasons why people are ending up homeless in these in situations, then we will be able to lower the chances of that cycle repeating itself. And with this, people won't have to worry about are they going to sleep the next night and how am I going to get out of this situation, because when we do nothing, those people that might have just fit into domestic violence, the people that might have fit into just substance abuse, they end up fitting into all of those because they feel so hopeless that they don't know where to turn. So they end up using every resource that they have available to them, but it ends up causing them to stay homeless. So as a city, we need to look at more than just solving where we see the issues more. We need to look out into the rest of the county and start addressing the homeless in that areas. Because if we don't address that, then the numbers are going to keep growing. And like one of the other speakers already said, seeing the amount of children that were homeless is shocking. It was shocking for me to even notice that there was many people with children homeless. So as a city, I just say that we need to do better. We need to reach out, and we need to be more willing to help those in need.
Refocus is a production of the San Diego Union-Tribune. This episode was produced by myself, Lauren Flynn, Alejandro Tamayo, and Michael Kep. Please tell us how we're doing, and subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes. Until next time.